Molech today.
Yes. Another part of the Dark Trinity.
I tell you, these guys, all right, so we talked about Ishtar last week, and Ishtar we know is the goddess of sex and the goddess of fertility and the goddess of transgenderism. We understand that because she could go from male to female and chose to do that. She loved orgies. She loved all the same-sex relationships that we see today. She is not mentioned as Ishtar in the Bible, but as, I can't remember her name right now.
That's like Ashmatoth or something. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah. We'll put
I don't know if I have her
in the Bible here so you can.
Yeah. It's oh, I had it written down. I won't find it quickly. Yeah, I'm not.
I think you're right.
Real quick. Yeah, it is. You can put that word on the screen. Yeah. So she was also the goddess of prostitution.
Yes, thank you.
So,
yes, she was a prostitute herself. So if you didn't listen to last week's podcast and you want to understand what the Dark Trinity is, we encourage you to go listen to last week's podcast on Ishtar. Molech, we're going to focus on this week, who is the, according to how the name is put together in Hebrew, he is the king of shame. So Molech is two consonants from the Hebrew language, one meaning king and one meaning shame, and he is the king of shame. But he's also the deity. I don't want to call him a god. He is the deity that the Canaanites sacrificed their children to. And the process for which they did that was horrific. So let's talk about the history of Molech and the sacrifice, and then tie it into today and what we know to be part of the abortion industry.
Yeah. He's also known as the destroyer, aptly, right? And, we learned that also that Baal ushered in Ishtar, and Ishtar ushered in Molech. So the things that, like what happened in history back before, we're experiencing again now, right? And what stopped it back then was Christianity coming in. So it's like evil being pushed out by good. So when you leave a void, of good, what are you going to get? Evil is going to come in.
Yep.
So that's, in a nutshell, that's basically what happened. But the Canaanites are horrid and just parental sacrifice.
Yes.
Why? Because they believed if they sacrificed their children, and it could have been even their most favorite child, they believed that they were going to receive prosperity, whether it be money or good weather or great crops or whatever. That's what they believed, and that they would have blessings from it.
And they were also told that if they shed tears during this ritual, that their sacrifice was not going to be worthy. So parents had to literally watch their children die. And we're going to tell you how this death came to be. They literally had to watch their children die without shedding a tear in order to receive the gifts from Molech that they were expecting or asking for. So
as a mother, I just can't even imagine. I can't even imagine going to the altar with my child, but yeah, I don't know.
So Molech, we've been trying for the last 20 minutes to find a good description of Molech, but the only thing that we can find is that he had a bull head And then his body was typically shaped in like with ovens in it, which makes sense because of parents sacrificed their children to Molech. But basically he was a giant metal statue with an altar and a bull head, and his arms were outstretched as if he were receiving. And they would heat this metal statue up until it was red. Oh gosh, this is just giving me chills talking about it. They would heat this metal statue up until it was fire red. And then the parents would go up and lay their children on the platform, and the children would burn to death. And so that they didn't have to hear the screams of the infant, they would play drums really, really loudly. And this was their sacrifice to Molech.
Yeah. They had special music that they would play.
Yes.
It's yeah. Yeah. And interestingly enough, I mean, not interestingly enough, but from the Bible, Leviticus 18:21, and this is English Standard Version, but you shall not give any of your children to offer them to Molech, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. And then from 2 Kings, and this ties into what you're saying, and he defiled Topheth, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, which is in the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter to pass through the fire of Molech. So it's in the Bible. Molech is in the Bible. This is not like a made up, deity or God, or that's little g. If we say God at any time during this, it's a lower G.
Yeah. Yeah. So then there's Leviticus 22, an Israelite. Did you already read this one? An Israelite or any foreigner residing in Israel who sacrifices any of his children to Molech is to be put to death. The members of this community are to stone him. Then it goes all the way into Jeremiah. They built high places for Baal in the valley of Ben Hinnom to sacrifice their sons and daughters to Molech. Though I never commanded, nor did it enter my mind, that they should do such a detestable thing, so make Judah sin. So Molech is mentioned, I think 10 times is what I read in the Bible. 10 times. I think he's even mentioned in the New Testament in one passage. Because I just, how can anyone believe that sacrificing a child is going to bring them good? But the problem is, we even see that today. If you didn't watch last week, go back and watch last week, and you'll hear about a witch that I spoke of specifically who has sacrificed many children, and you can hear about how that happened. But and that's modern day.
Yeah. Well, and think of the parallels with this also. So back then, they would sacrifice their children before they were born and after they were born. So and later even than that. So it could have been at any time that the sacrifice was made, and they would, I think we talked about it a little bit last week. They would just rip open the mother.
Yeah.
To sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah. And this was accepted. This was a community that believed in these insane practices. But, when you really think about it, I mean, Adam and Eve, right? We were tempted as humans at that point, and that's where sin became part of our daily lives. But if you look at the walk of Moses, he went up to go get the commandments from God, and because he was gone for too long, they immediately built a golden cow to start worshiping. What is I haven't done the research on this, and maybe Sheri, but what in the world made people believe that worshiping a golden statue of a cow, of all things, would bring them fortune and prosperity?
Was that also symbolism of Baal? I mean, I do wonder. And so again, it was creeping in, right? The void happened with Moses leaving, and the stark Trinity started seeping in again.
But here's the thing, it was 40 days. It happened in 40 days. That's a very short amount of time.
Yeah. It's, I mean, and if we start looking at our time now, and like I was saying about basically the abortion back then, we're seeing it now. We're seeing it with, you know, abortion happening at any level and child sacrifice happening later for a child.
Yes.
You can look at it in different ways. I mean, whether it be, you know, sex trafficking, whether it would be parents taking their children to the doctor to change their sex. These are all like sacrifices, because in some cases they're removing body parts also, which is another sacrifice. Right. And we've been convinced also now that if we, you know, it's okay to abort your baby because the parts can be used for science. It can be used for, you know, good things for health. And I mean, it's all twisted. Our minds have been altered and twisted by all of this.
Yeah. There is such a black market for aborted fetus parts, and Planned Parenthood is one of the biggest purchasers. I would encourage anyone to go just do a Google search for videos, you know, of Planned Parenthood conversations, and they're everywhere, because what's the website?
Project Veritas did some.
Many Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, and they did some
talk about it.
And it's horrific the way the woman speaks. They're eating, and she's speaking about this just as like it's nothing, and it's like it's horrifying. But I mean, even, you know, going back to the 70s when we got abortion back across the whole U.S., right? Because it was put into law. Before that, in the 60s, different states were coming on board with it. So again, it's easing in, and then we get abortion across the U.S. And, you know, they're estimating right now that I think 60 million babies have been aborted since that time.
I've read 80.
60 million. Yeah, it's probably more at this point, but and they expect it to go over 1 billion.
Yeah.
And because the U.S. did it, that's what's creating it across the world to happen too. So it's spreading across the world, and, you know, lots of other countries are sacrificing their children, because that is really what it is at this point. It's a sacrifice.
Yeah.
You're sacrificing your child. I mean, it's that's not the way they want to portray it to you. But no, to make your life so much easier, you can be a free woman. You don't have to be tied down, and you can, you know, go after your goals professionally. And I mean, that's all the things that we've been told along the way, that, oh, you don't let yourself be, and it's just a blob.
Well, and this is a huge part of the feminist movement that's been going on since the 60s too. If you think about it, you know, women fought, they say that women fought to vote and women fought to become career women, but I think the agenda was actually pushed by men, and women got on board. So I do believe that if we were in 30s and 40s right now, talking to modern day housewives, pre and maybe even post World War II, they would love to go back to being housewives. I mean, that's my understanding and the research that I've done, is most women, most middle-class women who are, or whatever the case may be, who were, you know, had a spouse that was taking care of them and their children financially, and all they had to do was maintain their home. That was their job, and they were completely fine with that. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I would never suggest that we take away women's voting rights. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But my point is, something drove the push, and I do not believe that it was women who drove the push for women to have such a voice. And you know what? We have a voice today. We're not going back in history. I'm happy about that. I'm glad that we get to speak up. but I'm not a feminist by any stretch of the imagination in terms of, I believe in traditional gender roles. I believe in moms taking care of the kids. I believe that, men should be providers. I believe in all of that. And I think that that's how we were, we were gifted with bodies to have babies. We were gifted with the ability to bring life into this world. And that's the movement that we're seeing happen right now is taking that gift away. It's basically saying, God, you don't know what you're doing. I don't want to be the person that you brought me into this world to be. And so they're changing it, and it's a slap in the face to God. It's a poke in the eye, as my pastor says. And the abortion industry is continuing to grow because of that push for women's rights, women's careers, women's success. If you look at all of the self-help books that are on the shelf today, if you look at all of these coaches who are out there just telling women, even Sheri and I met through a Christian business coach, but even that experience is so different for me today in my head. The Proverbs 31 woman was not a woman who was out there trying to change women's roles in the world. She just helped her family. Her husband still provided for her family. And I think that there's this misconception or this change in what that's supposed to look like. And I always hear women talk about Proverbs 31, Proverbs 31. But we are supposed to be equal to our husband in terms of those things. That's not, we were never designed to be the weak link in a marriage. We were designed to be the baby giver, and we have our own roles, but it's just been so twisted through the years as God's been removed from the household and removed from the government and removed from the school, that people don't see it that way anymore. We're supposed to be these powerhouse CEOs, and I'm sorry, but I like being feminine. I like having my role. I think that more and more women are coming forward with that same view.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And the blur, it was just with what you were saying, the blur that's been created in this deception and the confusion, and who brings confusion about our gender roles, right? Men can have babies now. Come on. I mean, it's like,
sure they
we're sitting here going, that's ludicrous.
Yeah.
No. And so, yeah, we were uniquely and specially designed for that by God. So,
yeah.
And I think some of them are waking up and realizing that is not true, and it's kind of crazy. And a lot more people, I think, are stepping up and starting to speak out about some of these things that they don't make sense. But that's the insidiousness of, all of it. And, again, it's all for the child sacrifice.
Yes. Yes, it is.
So, yeah.
It's just so mind-blowing. It's so mind-blowing that people are even suggesting that men can have children today. It's just not real. It's not real. You can only have a child if you were born a woman. You can only have a child if you have a uterus, and only women are gifted with uteruses. I don't care what you think you are. And that's the hard part. It's hard to watch doctors suggest that this is okay. It's hard to watch hospitals who are, bringing on transgender DEI people just for the sake of having the diversity in the hospital, whether they're qualified or not. We have evolved into a very scary time right now. Doctors who take oaths to protect people that are giving children castration drugs. We're in a very scary time. But I want to get back to Molech really quickly, and I want to tie the sacrifice of the burning the baby to death and what late-term abortion looks like. So abortion in general, I don't care how big or small a fetus is in the womb, abortion in general is literally sucking the parts of a baby apart. It is literally ripping that baby apart. But when you get into late-term abortion, this pill that they have now, or a late term abortion, is basically the pill that they get to stop the heartbeat of the baby, smothers the baby to death. It basically cuts off any food, and that child starves to death and dies in the womb. But then there's these shots that they give, and the shots burn the baby. So it comes out looking like it's been burned to death. Now tell me how that doesn't relate to Molech.
Yeah.
And if you're not convinced, I will put a link for you to put in the show notes that will show you a picture of a late term aborted baby, and it looks like it's been burned to death. And let me just tell you another part of that. So Planned Parenthood and other abortion clinics that do a lot of abortions in a given day take those burned babies and throw them in the dumpster.
Mm. Well, and that's what they did back in the Canaanite time too. And it didn't, you know, if the child was deformed or had any issues, that's what they did. They threw them out in the garbage, or they, you know, for the animals to get, or whatever. And so the parallels are all there. They're all there. And so another interesting parallel too is that in the olden times, instead of the rich using their own children, they would go to the poor and they would get their children, who they felt, the poor would be like, they felt like they were doing something good for the world, for their community or whatnot. And so the rich would take the poor baby and have it sacrificed. So now let's think about Planned Parenthood. Where are they located? In some of the worst neighborhoods. And I thought this was interesting too, because Khan said in his book, Return of the Gods, that Molech was actually racist, because the babies, most of the babies that are being aborted in Planned Parenthood are Black. And in fact, in some of those neighborhoods, there are more, this is horrifying, there are more Black babies being aborted than are being birthed.
I believe that. I believe
it too, but it's just, you know.
Oh, it is horrible.
It's horrifying.
Yeah.
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 And Planned Parenthood is in every state, red states and blue states. It doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Go look it up. Look it up and see how many and how close they are to your, you know, to where you live, because they're there.
Yeah. And I will say this, and I'm going to probably say this a lot in any episode that we do. I am a post-abortive, born-again Christian, and there is nothing worse than living with that sin, that understanding of what I've done. But in not in my defense, but in the defense of the people who do this and don't realize what they're doing, there is zero counseling. And granted, mine was 30 years ago, but there is zero counseling that happened. And I'm sure it doesn't happen today, even with all of the pro-life push that's happening. They are welcoming people in and giving them this feel good, like you were saying earlier, of this is going to help you. You're going to have a better life. You're not going to have the responsibility. You're doing what's right for you. You're doing what's right for the baby because you can't afford it. I mean, there's so many excuses for them to want to take your money, and they're going to try to make you feel so good. But I will say this, and this is stuff that I've seen in research that I've done since, if you question what they're doing, the attitude shifts and they don't become supportive and helpful anymore. They will turn on you faster than you can say, can I get some help? So if you are even considering something like abortion, first of all, you're sacrificing to one of these deities. But second of all, you're giving up the opportunity to help somebody else have a baby. You know, I mean, there's so much good that can come from having a child, even if you can't afford it. I would just suggest that you go to a Christian pregnancy center and let them help you, because my company, I have a body butter company. We donate to Christian pro-life centers every month. there are so many people out there supporting these centers so that women can have children, even if they can't keep them, instead of aborting them. There's other ways. There's just such better ways.
And there's a lot of help that will happen with that if you decide,
Oh, yeah.
and you do want to, put your baby up for adoption. So,
Yeah.
And one other thing that I thought of when you were talking about the abortions, the pill, the thing about it is that the woman still has to go through labor.
Yes.
It happened with me. I miscarried at 9 weeks, and that's not very far along. I mean, I was just still like embracing the fact that I was actually pregnant. I didn't show, anything, but, I went through mini labor to, pass that fetus along and out of my body. And so a woman who goes through that, they still have to go through some type of labor. So think about the trauma of that as well. I mean, that's pretty traumatic.
But let's be real clear. A D&C from a miscarriage is not an abortion, even though they're trying to say that it is. If a Christian woman who's in the eye of the media has a miscarriage and has to go through a D&C, they're the people out there are trying to say that is an abortion. A dead fetus in your womb is different from killing a fetus in your womb. Your body has to dispose of that. You have to get it out because it will make you sick. That's a whole other story. So let's not construe the difference between an abortion and a D&C. No.
Yeah, and I ended up not having to have a D&C. I was able to my body was able to expel everything. Yeah, no, that was a blessing. But so it's there's a lot that goes around all of that. A lot of trauma for the woman that they're not letting you know that there's trauma that you're going to experience. So we don't want you to know, unfortunately.
So that's just another way that we are watching the world turn and become more and more evil. We are seeing more and more sacrifice. These deities are returning. Again, if you didn't see last week's podcast, go take a look at it on Ishtar. But we also encourage you to get that book, Return of the Gods, which we'll put a link to in every episode, because he really goes into some great detail about Baal, Molech, and Ishtar. And next week we'll talk about Baal, but it's important that we understand the choices that we make and who we serve when we make those choices. So either you're serving the God of this world and the God of the Bible, or you're serving the God of this world and the God of sin and hate, and that's Satan and all of his fallen angels, which these deities are considered to be. I prefer to serve the God of the Bible because I want to go to heaven. It's your choice, but I would encourage you to think about it, because there's a lot of hate around children in the world today. And if you don't believe it, just look at the number of children that are losing their virtue. Changing your gender is a loss of virtue. I don't care how old you are.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
So
scary times. It really is. And I think that book really magnifies, it helps you understand, I think, is probably the best thing of what is actually going on in this world. It's helped me put some things together of like, okay, now, because, otherwise you're just like, what in the world? But this makes sense that, these deities, these lowercase g gods are reemerging, and they're trying to take back our world. And there's only one way to stop that, and that is for the world to shift into Christianity again, because that's what pushed them out last time.
Yeah. And that's the fight that we fight every day, even as we know the end times are coming. The more people that can turn their lives around, the more people that get raptured and go to heaven. So
That's right.
just think about it, or help somebody else think about it. And on that note, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. We really want to help people understand the evils that are going on in this world, and we can't do that without your help. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you about ball next week. Have a good week.